The Seraphim's Dragon. Act 1. Chapter 1, The Last Sunset. Issei Hayata had rehearsed this day in his head for a week straight. A real date, with a real girl, in the middle of autumn when the light overcoat turned gold and soft. Yuma Amano had asked him out herself, and he still could not quite believe it. He had spent the morning agonizing over which jacket to wear, had nearly missed the train, and had spent every yen he owned on a meal that left him grinning like an idiot for the rest of the afternoon. The day had gone perfectly. They had walked through the shopping district, fed the pigeons in the park, and talked about nothing important in the way that felt like everything. When Yuma suggested they watch the sunset from the fountain near the old shrine, Issei agreed without hesitation. He did not notice the way her smile had changed, sharper now, colder, as the light began to fail. Issei, she said, turning to face him fully. Her voice had lost its warmth entirely. Would you die for me? He laughed, thinking it was a joke, some strange line from a movie. Then her shadow stretched wrong against the fountain stone, black feathers tearing free from her back in a violent unfurling, and the girl he had spent the day with was gone. In her place stood something with crimson eyes and a spear of light crackling in her hand, and Issei understood, in the half-second before the world ended, that he was not going to get the chance to be afraid. The spear went through his chest. He felt no pain, only a strange falling sensation, as though the ground had given way beneath him, and he was dropping through the floor of the world. The fallen angel above him spoke words he could not process, something about a sacred gear and a waste of effort, and then she was gone, and the sky above him was just the sky, indifferent and vast, and it was getting darker. He thought distantly that he should call for help. He thought of his parents, of the dinner his mother was probably making right now, of the homework he had not finished. He thought that it was strange to be dying on a Tuesday. The cold spread from his chest outward, and his vision narrowed to a tunnel, and at the very end of that tunnel, impossibly, a light began to grow. It was not the light of the dying sun. It was warmer than that, and gentler, descending from directly above him in a column that turned the darkening sky to gold. Issei's failing eyes tracked it upward, past the rooftops, past the clouds, to a single point that seemed to be both impossibly far away and right beside him at once. A voice spoke, not loud, but present everywhere at once, the way a heartbeat is present everywhere in a body. I am sorry I could not arrive sooner. The light touched down beside the fountain and resolved into the shape of a man. He was tall, with hair the color of wheat and wings of pure white folded gently at his back, 12 feathers gleaming with a brightness that did not hurt to look at, only comforted. His eyes, when they found Issei's, were the color of a clear winter sky, and they held an old and terrible sorrow. A boy, the man said quietly, kneeling. Just a boy, caught in a war he never asked to join. Issei tried to speak and managed only a wet, broken sound. The man placed a hand over the wound in his chest, and Issei felt something there, something that had always been there without his knowing, a small dense kernel of power coiled tight beneath his ribs like a sleeping animal. The man's brow furrowed. A sacred gear, he murmured. And not a small one. The boosted gear. Of course it would be you. He looked up at the darkening sky, and for a moment something like resolve crossed his face, an expression of a being about to do something he knew he was not supposed to do. Forgive me, old friend, he said, to no one Issei could see. I think this rule was always meant to be broken by someone. Light gathered in the man's palm, gold shading into white, and Issei felt it pour into him like sunrise poured into a window. The cold retreated. The darkness at the edges of his vision burned away. He felt his heart, which had stopped, begin to beat again, once, twice, and then steadily, and with each beat something inside his chest unfolded further, a second presence settling alongside his own soul like a great sleeping weight finding its place. A voice, ancient and rumbling and entirely unbothered by the circumstances, spoke inside his mind. Well, this is new. Issei sat up so fast his vision spun. He was whole. He was breathing. He was alive, and there was a dragon's voice in his head, and an angel was kneeling in front of him with both hands glowing faintly gold, watching him with an expression of cautious relief. Easy, the man said. You have been through more in the last 10 minutes than most souls endure in a lifetime. Breathe. You are safe now. Who, Issei managed, are you? My name is Michael, the man said, as though this were an ordinary thing to say. I am sorry that we meet under such circumstances. The being who attacked you was a fallen angel, one who should not have been operating in this territory at all, and I came as quickly as I could when I felt her intentions turn toward violence. I was not quick enough to prevent the wound. I was, fortunately, quick enough to prevent the rest. Issei stared at him. The name meant something, some half-remembered fragment from a religious studies class, but his mind could not fit the pieces together fast enough. The rest, he repeated. You mean? I died? For a moment, Michael said gently. Only for a moment. And I am afraid that in saving you, I have changed something about you that cannot be changed back. May I see your hand? Issei held it out, numb, and Michael took it in both of his own. Light bloomed across Issei's forearm, gold and white intertwining, and a shape rose to the surface of his skin like a brand surfacing through water, a crest combining the curved claw marks of a dragon with the layered geometry of a six-winged seal. It did not hurt. It felt, if anything, like something settling into place that had always belonged there. What is that? Issei breathed. That, Michael said, is the mark of the brave saint system. It is very old, and it has never, to my knowledge, been used in the way I have just used it. The boosted gear inside you, the dragon you can hear even now arguing with itself about what just happened, has been touched by the light of heaven. The two have fused. You are, as far as I am aware, the first of your kind. A holy dragon. The first, the dragon's voice rumbled, sounding deeply put out. Do you have any idea, partner, how many laws this violates? Dragons and divine light have hated each other since before your kind learned fire. And now I am stuck with some of it. In my own soul. Wonderful. You can hear him too? Issei asked, a little wildly. I can, Michael said, and there was the faintest hint of amusement in his eyes now. Drake, I assume. The Welsh dragon. We have never spoken directly before. I confess I expected more dignity. Dignity, Drake muttered, is for dragons who have not just been baptized against their will. Issei laughed, and the laugh turned into something closer to a sob, the shock of the last several minutes finally catching up to him all at once. Michael's hand settled on his shoulder, warm and steady, and the panic that had been building in Issei's chest eased, not because the fear was gone, but because for the first time since Yuma's smile had changed, he did not feel alone. What happens now? Issei asked, when he could speak again. Now, Michael said, helping him to his feet, I think we should get you somewhere safe, and somewhere quiet, where I can explain everything properly. There are people in this town, devils, who already had their eyes on you because of your sacred gear. They will know something has changed the moment they sense you. I would rather you hear the truth from me before anyone else offers you their version of it. Devils, Issei repeated faintly. Devils, fallen angels, angels, Michael said, beginning to walk, his wings folding away into nothing as though they had never been there at all, though Issei could still feel the warmth of them somehow, a kind of afterimage in his soul. The world is larger and stranger than you knew this morning, Issei Shidou. I am sorry that you have had to learn it this way. But I promise you, you are not walking into it without help. Heaven does not abandon those it has touched. They walked together through streets that were just beginning to light their lamps against the falling dark, an angel and a boy who, an hour ago, had been an ordinary high school student with an ordinary heart, and who now carried inside that heart the weight of a dragon and the warmth of heaven's light, fused into something the world had never seen before. Chapter 2, The Church on the Hill. Michael led him not toward the busy center of town, but uphill, along a winding road Issei had never noticed before, to a small church set back among old trees. It was the kind of building that looked as though it had been quietly forgotten by the rest of the world, ivy creeping along its stone walls, its windows dark. Issei hesitated at the gate. It is abandoned, Michael said, noticing his hesitation. Officially. In practice, it is one of the few places in this town where heaven's authority still holds quietly, and where we will not be observed. Come. There is someone I would like you to meet, and there is a great deal I need to explain. Inside, candlelight flickered from sconces that had not been lit a moment ago, gold light spilling warm across old pews and a worn altar. A woman sat near the front, golden curls falling past her shoulders, wings of brilliant white folded neatly at her back, and when she turned to look at them, Issei felt something in his chest, the new presence, the place where the brave Saint Mark lived, give a single soft pulse, like a struck bell. Michael, the woman said, rising. Her voice was light and musical, but her eyes, when they found Issei, widened with open surprise. You actually did it. I felt something change in the boundary an hour ago, and I thought I was imagining it. Issei Shidou, Michael said, this is Gabriel, one of the 4 great seraphim of heaven, and an old friend. Gabriel, this is the boy I told you about on the way here. He is, as of this evening, the first holy dragon knight in recorded history. Gabriel approached slowly, the way one might approach something rare and easily startled, and Issei found himself standing very straight without quite meaning to. Up close, she seemed to glow faintly, not with light exactly, but with a kind of stillness, an aura of peace that made the candle flames around them burn steadier. She studied his face, then the mark on his forearm, and her expression shifted from surprise into something gentler, something almost wondering. Hello, Issei, she said softly. I imagine you have had a very long evening. You could say that, Issei managed. Sit, Michael said, gesturing to the front pew. Both of you. I will explain everything from the beginning, and I would ask that you hold your questions until I am finished, because there is a great deal to cover, and very little of it will make sense out of order. Issei sat. Gabriel settled beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her, and Michael remained standing, framed by candlelight, and began to speak. He explained the 3 factions, heaven, the underworld of the devils, and the fallen angels who had once been angels and had fallen from grace. He explained the great war fought between them centuries ago, a war so devastating it had nearly destroyed all 3 sides, and the uneasy peace that had followed, brittle and incomplete. He explained that Ko Town sat on a kind of border, claimed in part by a devil noble family, and that sacred gears, like the one Issei had carried his entire life without knowing it, were rare and powerful artifacts that all 3 factions watched for. The boosted gear, Michael said, is one of the 13 Longinus, the most powerful sacred gears that exist. It houses the soul of Draig, the Welsh dragon, one of the 2 heavenly dragons, beings of such raw power that both heaven and the underworld have spent centuries either hunting them or fearing them. The devil family that holds territory here, the Gremory, had already taken an interest in you because of it. They would likely have offered you a place among them tonight, had I not arrived first. Why didn't you let them? Issei asked, before he could stop himself, and then winced, remembering he had been told to hold his questions. Michael did not seem to mind. Because, Issei, when I felt that fallen angel's spear pierce your heart, I had only seconds to act, and only one tool available to me that could undo a mortal wound that severe. A reincarnation as a devil requires a living soul willing to make a pact and a peace prepared in advance. I had neither. What I had was the brave saint system, an old and largely theoretical rite of heaven, designed to restore a dying soul through holy light alone. It has never been successfully used on someone who already carried a sacred gear, let alone one of the Longinus. I did not know, when I used it, whether it would save you or destroy you both. The room was very quiet for a moment. It worked, Michael said simply. More completely than I dared hope. The light of the brave saint system and the soul of Draig have not destroyed each other, as every old text predicted they would. They have fused. You are, Issei, the first being in the history of the 3 factions to be both dragon and saint at once. A taboo made real, and somehow, a peaceful one. I would like it noted, Draig said dryly, that I object to the word taboo. I prefer unprecedented. It sounds less like I did something wrong. Gabriel laughed, a sound like bells, and the tension in the room eased fractionally. He really can hear us, she said to Michael, delighted. That is remarkable. Most hosts cannot perceive their sacred gear's voice this clearly so soon. The fusion runs deeper than a normal bond, Michael said. Which brings me to why I asked you to come tonight, Gabriel, and why I have brought Issei here rather than simply healing him and sending him home to forget any of this happened, which, I should say, is no longer possible. His soul now carries a portion of heaven's light, woven into him at the deepest level. He will need guidance, training, and protection, because every faction in this conflict will sense, eventually, that something extraordinary has happened in this town. I would like heaven to be the first to offer him that protection, openly and honestly, before anyone else can offer him something less honest. Gabriel turned to Issei, and her expression was serious now, though no less kind. Issei, she said, I want to be very clear with you, because I think you deserve that more than anything else tonight. Nothing has been decided for you. Michael saved your life, and in doing so, changed what you are. But what you do with that, whether you choose to walk with heaven, whether you choose this path at all, that is yours to decide. We are not here to claim you. We are here because, like it or not, you are going to need friends very soon, and I would like to be one of them, if you will let me. Issei looked down at the mark on his arm, gold and white light still moving faintly beneath the surface of his skin, and thought of Yuma's face changing in the fountain light, and of the cold spreading through his chest, and of the warmth that had replaced it. He thought of his parents, asleep in their beds a few streets away, who had no idea any of this was happening. He thought that an hour ago his biggest worry had been whether Yuma liked him back. I don't really understand any of this, he said finally. Not really. But you saved my life. And you're being straight with me, when you didn't have to be. So. Yeah. I'll listen. I want to know more. Gabriel's smile, when it came, was warm enough that Issei felt it like sunlight on his skin. Then that, she said, is more than enough for tonight. There is one more thing, Michael said, and something in his tone made both of them look at him. Issei, the fallen angel who attacked you tonight was not acting alone, and she was not supposed to be operating in co at all. Her presence here, and her willingness to kill a civilian for his sacred gear, suggests that the local fallen angel cell is either rogue, or acting on orders that violate the truce between our factions. Either possibility is serious. I intend to look into it personally, quietly, before this escalates into something that draws the devil's attention as well, and possibly reignites tensions none of us want reignited. You think this could turn into something bigger, Issei said slowly. I think, Michael said, that a great deal depends on what happens in the next few weeks, and I think that you, whether you intended it or not, are now at the center of it. Which is exactly why I would like you to begin training as soon as possible. Not to fight, necessarily. But to understand what you carry, and to be able to protect yourself, and perhaps, in time, others. Drake's voice rumbled again, quieter this time, almost thoughtful. For what it is worth, partner. I have lived inside more hosts than I care to count, across more centuries than you would believe. Most of them wanted power for its own sake. You, an hour after nearly dying, are mostly worried about your parents, and about whether this is all a dream. That is. Not nothing. I think we will manage. Issei let out a breath he had not realized he was holding, and for the first time since the fountain, something like calm settled over him. Outside, the last light of the sunset finally faded from the windows of the old church, and the candles burned a little brighter to fill the dark, gold and warm and steady. Chapter 3, A New Morning. Issei did not remember falling asleep. He remembered Michael walking him home sometime past midnight, murmuring something to his parents' door that left them undisturbed and unaware their son had been gone at all, and he remembered lying in bed afterward staring at the ceiling, replaying the fountain, the spear, the light, over and over, waiting for the fear to catch up with him properly. It never quite did. Instead he had simply, eventually, slept, the way a person sleeps after carrying something heavy for a very long time and finally setting it down. He woke to his alarm at the normal time, and for a moment, lying in the gray morning light, he almost believed it had all been an extraordinarily vivid dream. Then he sat up, and the mark on his forearm caught the light, gold lines moving faintly beneath his skin like something breathing, and Drake's voice rumbled into his thoughts, dry and entirely unsurprised. Good morning, partner. For what it is worth, you did not imagine any of it. Welcome to the rest of your life. Right, Issei said out loud, to his empty room. Okay. Right. He went through the motions of getting ready for school with the strange, careful focus of someone afraid that moving too quickly might shatter something. Breakfast tasted normal. His mother asked if he had slept well and he said yes, And it was not even a lie, not really. He walked to school along his usual route, past the fountain, and made himself look at it directly, just once, and found that it was only a fountain, stone and water and morning light, with no trace at all of what had happened there the night before. The body remembers, even if the world has tidied itself away, Drake observed. That is not a bad thing. It means you survived something real. Thanks, Issei muttered. Very comforting. I am a dragon, not a therapist. You are welcome. School felt simultaneously exactly the same and entirely different. His two best friends, Matsuda and Motohama, greeted him with their usual enthusiastic nonsense about the previous evening's date, demanding details with the eager, slightly desperate hunger of boys who had never had a date of their own and wanted to live vicariously through someone who had. Issei found himself smiling and brushing them off with practiced ease, the same easy deflections he always used, and it was almost a relief, how normal it felt, even as the mark on his arm pulsed faintly beneath his sleeve. It was during the lunch break, sitting alone on the rooftop where he sometimes went to think, that he felt it. A presence, approaching, powerful enough that even Issei, who had no training at all in sensing such things, felt the hair on his arms stand up. He turned to find a girl standing a few feet away, blue hair cropped short, eyes the color of amethyst, watching him with an expression of open curiosity that did nothing to soften the sheer weight of the presence surrounding her. You're Issei Hayadu, she said. It was not really a question. That's me, Issei said carefully, getting to his feet. Devil, Drake murmured, low and even. And not a weak one. Stay calm. She has not drawn a weapon, which means she is curious, not hostile. Yet. My name is Sona Citri, the girl said. I am the student council president here, though I imagine that is not the part of my introduction that interests you. I felt something change in this town's spiritual landscape last night, something significant, and it traced back to you. I would like to know what happened. Issei hesitated. Michael had not told him to keep anything secret, exactly, but he also had not told him what to say if he was confronted directly, on the second day, by someone who already seemed to know more than he did. He settled, in the end, for something close to the truth. I got attacked, he said. Last night. By someone who turned out to not be human. I almost died. And then an angel saved me, and apparently changed me in the process. I don't fully understand it myself yet, honestly. Sona's eyes narrowed slightly, not with hostility, but with the focus of someone recalculating a problem in real time. An angel, she repeated. Not a devil. Yeah, that is. Unexpected, Sona said, and for the first time something like genuine surprise crossed her composed features. There was supposed to be a devil response prepared for exactly this scenario. A sacred gear possessor, attacked by a fallen angel, in territory under Gremory protection. The plan was for Rias to intervene and offer reincarnation. If an angel arrived first instead, she trailed off, clearly working through implications Issei could not follow. Look, Issei said, raising both hands slightly, I don't want any trouble. I didn't ask for any of this. I just want to go to school and figure out how to live my life now that, apparently, I'm something different than I was yesterday. Something in Sona's expression eased, just slightly. I believe you, she said. For what it is worth, Hayadu, I am not here to cause trouble either. The truce between our factions exists for a reason, and an angel intervening to save a human life, even one with a sacred gear, does not violate it, whatever my fellow devils might think when they hear about it. I am simply recalibrating. This changes things. Things being? Issei asked. Politics, Sona said, with the air of someone summarizing several volumes in a single word. Larger than you for now. I would advise you to be careful, Hayadu. Whatever you have become, there will be people, on every side, who are very interested in what it means. Some of them will not be as patient, or as honest as I am being with you right now. With that, she turned and walked back toward the stairwell, her presence retreating as smoothly as it had arrived, leaving Issei standing alone on the rooftop with the wind tugging at his uniform and Drake's voice settling into something thoughtful in the back of his mind. She is right, for what it is worth, Drake said. You have stepped, without meaning to, into the middle of a very old, very careful balance. Heaven saving you was unprecedented. The devils will want to know why. The fallen angels who attacked you will want to know why their plan failed, and whether you can identify them. None of this is going away, partner, however much you might wish it would. I know, Issei said quietly, looking out over the rooftops of Ko toward the hills, toward the small church among the trees where, he suspected, Michael and Gabriel were already discussing exactly the kind of complications Sona had just described. I know. But Michael said I'd have help. And Gabriel too. I have to believe that means something. It does, Drake agreed, after a moment, and there was something almost gentle in the great dragon's voice, an old creature who had seen centuries of hosts struggle alone, watching this one already reaching, instinctively, for the hands offered to him. It means a great deal, actually. More than you know yet. Now. Lunch is almost over, and I believe your friend with the binoculars is about to ask you something deeply inappropriate about your date last night. Try to look normal. Issei laughed, surprising himself with how easy it was, and headed back down the stairs toward whatever the rest of an entirely new life had in store for him, the gold light of the mark on his arm settling quietly beneath his sleeve, warm and steady, like a promise kept. The Seraphim's Dragon. Act 2. Chapter 4. The Training Grounds. The church on the hill, Issei discovered over the following days, had a basement that was far larger than the building above it had any right to contain. Michael explained, with the mild apology of someone describing a perfectly normal inconvenience, that the space had been folded using a minor application of dimensional scripture, the same principle that allowed certain sacred sites to hold more than their physical dimensions suggested. The basement opened into a wide stone hall, lit by floating motes of gentle golden light, with training rings marked into the floor and racks of practice weapons along one wall. We will start slowly, Michael said, on the first afternoon, as Issei stood in the center of one of the rings in borrowed training clothes, feeling distinctly out of place. You are not a soldier, Issei, and I have no intention of turning you into one before you are ready, or at all, if that is not the path you choose. But you carry power now that responds to your will whether you understand it or not, and an untrained sacred gear, especially one of this magnitude, is more dangerous to its bearer than to anyone else. So what do I do? Issei asked. Reach for it, Michael said simply. Drake knows the shape of it far better than I do. Let him guide you. Right then, Drake said, and Issei could have sworn the ancient dragon sounded almost eager, the way an old teacher might sound faced with a student who, against all odds, actually wanted to learn. Close your eyes. Forget the arm, forget the gauntlet you have seen in old paintings. The boosted gear is not a glove. It is a state. A door. All you are doing, when you call it, is opening that door wide enough to let a little of what is on the other side through. Try it. Gently. Issei closed his eyes, and reached, the way Drake described, for a door he could not see but could somehow feel, a warmth at the edge of his awareness, gold shading into crimson. He pulled, gently, the way one might ease open a window, and felt something answer. A gauntlet of crimson and gold scales materialized over his left forearm with a sound like a bell being struck, a green jewel set into the back of the hand glowing with steady inner light. Issei opened his eyes and stared at it, turning his hand slowly, watching the light pulse in time with his heartbeat. It did not feel heavy. It felt, if anything, like an extension of his own arm that had simply been missing his whole life, only now returned. There it is, Michael said, and there was real warmth in his voice. The boosted gear, in its base form. How does it feel? Warm, Issei said, surprised. And? Right. Like it's supposed to be there. Boost, Drake's voice said, from somewhere within the gauntlet itself now, and a moment later the jewel flashed, and a second voice, mechanical and resonant, spoke aloud into the training hall. Boost. Issei nearly fell over. Whoa. What was that? That, Michael said, is the boosted gear's signature ability. Every 10 seconds, it doubles the wielder's power. In a normal sacred gear of this type, that doubling continues until the wielder reaches the limit, and then resets. With your fusion, however, I suspect the doubling will interact with the holy light woven into your soul in ways either of us has seen before. We should test that, carefully and slowly. Over the following hour, under Michael's careful guidance, Issei discovered that each boost did not simply double a single kind of power, the way it had for hosts before him. Instead, the doubling seemed to split, half of it deepening the raw strength and speed Drake's draconic nature provided, and half of it brightening the golden light that now lived at the very core of Issei's soul, until by the fifth boost the gauntlet itself was glowing so brightly that Michael had to raise a hand to shield his eyes, smiling all the while. "Remarkable," he murmured. "In a normal host, 5 sequential boosts would produce something fearsome, yes, but also something that strained at the edges of control, power that wanted to be unleashed violently. In you, Issei, I sense something else entirely. The power is there, in full. But it does not feel like it wants to destroy. It feels like it wants to protect. Like it is waiting for something to defend, rather than something to break. That," Drake said, with the air of a creature revising a long-held opinion, "is new. I have worn this gauntlet through wars, partner. Through hosts who used this power to level cities. I have never, not once in all my centuries, felt it want to do that." Issei looked down at the glowing gauntlet on his arm, gold light pulsing steady and warm, and thought of the fountain, of the spear of light, of the moment everything had gone cold, and then, impossibly, warm again. "Good," he said quietly. "I don't want to break anything. I just don't want anyone else to go through what I went through last week. If this can stop that from happening to someone else, then I'm glad it's like this." Gabriel, who had been sitting quietly on a stone bench near the edge of the training ring through all of this, rose and crossed to stand beside him, studying the gauntlet with open fascination. "May I?" she asked, holding out one hand, and when Issei nodded, she rested her fingers lightly against the crimson scales. Light, gold and white, rippled outward from the point of contact, gentle as a held breath, and Gabriel's eyes widened. "It recognizes me," she said softly, sounding almost moved. "The light in this gauntlet, it responds the way it would to another angel. Issei, do you understand what this means? You are not simply carrying a piece of heaven's power. You have become, in some sense, a part of heaven yourself. A dragon who is also, however strangely, one of us. Is that good?" Issei asked, uncertain. "It is wonderful," Gabriel said, and the smile she gave him then was bright enough that Issei felt his face heat, for reasons that had nothing to do with the training session. "I have spent centuries among angels, Issei, good and faithful souls every one of them, and I love them dearly. But there is something about you, even now, even after only a week, that feels different. Warmer somehow. I think heaven is going to be very glad to have you, whatever form that takes." Michael, watching the two of them with an expression of quiet, knowing patience that Issei was too distracted to notice, allowed himself a small smile of his own, and said nothing at all. Chapter 5, Letters from Rome. It was nearly 2 weeks after the night at the fountain when Michael called Issei to the church earlier than usual, on a Saturday morning, and met him at the door with an expression Issei had not seen on the Archangel before, something careful, almost hesitant, like a man preparing to deliver news he was not entirely sure how to frame. "I have received word from the church proper," Michael said, as they walked together into the training hall, where Gabriel was already waiting, along with 2 figures Issei did not recognize. "News of what happened to you could not be kept entirely quiet, not within heaven's own ranks, and word traveled faster than I would have liked. 2 of the church's finest young exorcists requested, and were granted, leave to come and meet you in person. I thought it best that you hear what they have to say directly, rather than second-hand." The 2 figures turned as they approached. One was a girl with hair the deep, vivid blue of a midnight sky, cut short and practical, and eyes that studied Issei with an intensity that felt almost like being measured for something. She wore simple traveling clothes, but a sword in a plain scabbard hung at her hip, and even sheathed, Issei could feel something from it, a low resonant hum, like a tuning fork struck somewhere far away. The other was a girl with long auburn hair and warm hazel eyes, dressed similarly, who broke into a wide, almost startled smile the moment she saw Issei, as though she had been expecting someone entirely different, and was pleasantly surprised by what she found instead. "This is Xenovia Quarta," Michael said, indicating the blue-haired girl, and this is Irina Shidou. Both are wielders of Excalibur fragments, among the Church's most capable young exorcists, despite their age. They asked to meet the boy who became a holy dragon knight. I believe, Issei, that this is the first time either of them has met one in person, because until 2 weeks ago, the concept did not exist. It's true, Xenovia said, without preamble, stepping closer and studying Issei's face with the same unblinking focus she had given him from across the hall. I read the reports 3 times and I still don't fully believe it. A dragon, bonded with holy light, and not consumed by it. Not corrupted. Do you have any idea how many doctrines that overturns? I had 3 separate arguments with my superiors about whether this was even theologically possible before they finally let me come see for myself. Xenovia, Irina said in the tone of someone gently steering a friend away from a cliff edge, maybe ease into it a little? He just survived being murdered 2 weeks ago. You can't just walk up and start quizzing him about doctrine. I am simply being direct, Xenovia said, entirely unbothered. Directness is efficient. Irina sighed, then turned the full warmth of her smile on Issei instead, offering her hand. Sorry about her. She means well, she just has approximately 0 filter. I'm Irina, it's really nice to meet you, Issei. I mean that. What happened to you sounds terrifying, and also, honestly, kind of incredible. Like something out of the old stories, except it actually happened, to a real person this week. That's... wow. Sorry, I'm rambling. Issei shook her offered hand, a little overwhelmed by the sheer warmth radiating from her, not unlike the warmth he had come to associate with Gabriel, though where Gabriel's presence was vast and ancient, Irina's felt immediate, bright, almost youthful despite the obvious power humming beneath it. It's, nice to meet you too, he managed. Both of you. I think. Xenovia, for her part, had drawn her sword partway from its scabbard, the blade catching the golden light of the training hall and seeming to glow brighter in response, and was watching the interaction between the blade and the mark on Issei's exposed forearm with frank scientific interest. Duran now responds to him, she said, half to herself. Look at that. It is brightening. As though it recognizes kinship. Michael, this is extraordinary. May I run a few tests? Perhaps, Michael said, with the patient amusement of someone who had clearly anticipated exactly this, after introductions are complete, and after Issei has had a chance to ask any questions of his own. He has been remarkably patient with a great many surprises these past 2 weeks, and I think he has earned the right to ask a few in return. Issei looked between the 2 newcomers, Xenovia's blunt, almost scholarly intensity and Irina's open, easy warmth, and found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he liked them both already, in the strange immediate way that people sometimes simply fit together. Okay, he said. I guess my first question is, why does it matter so much? The doctrine thing. Why is everyone so surprised that this is, peaceful? Xenovia's expression sobered, and for the first time the blunt energy faded into something more solemn. Because dragons, she said, have always been considered fundamentally incompatible with divinity. Not evil, exactly, but wild. Untamed. Outside the order that heaven represents. Every text, every doctrine, every recorded encounter between a dragon and holy power for as long as records exist, ends the same way. Either the dragon is destroyed by the light, or the light is corrupted by the dragon. There has never been a third option. Until you. For some of us, Irina added more gently, it's actually really hopeful, Issei. If a dragon and heaven's light can exist together peacefully inside one person, without either one destroying the other, then maybe that's true of bigger things too. Maybe devils and angels and fallen angels don't have to be enemies forever, either. I know that sounds like a big thing to put on one person. But that's kind of why we wanted to meet you. To see if it was real. And? Issei asked quietly. Is it? Real, I mean. Irina looked at him for a long moment, and then smiled again, softer this time, less startled and more certain. Yeah, she said. I think it is. Xenovia, watching the exchange, sheathed Duran now fully with a decisive click and nodded once, as though confirming something to herself. I would like to request, she said, turning to Michael with sudden formality, an extended assignment to Kotown. For research purposes. And if Issei has no objection, to assist in his training. A holy dragon knight should not have to learn swordsmanship from scratch when there are 2 Excalibur wielders standing in the room offering to teach him. I'd like that too, actually, Irina said quickly. If that's okay. I mean with you, Issei. We'd understand if it's a lot, 2 strangers suddenly wanting to stick around. Issei looked at Michael, who simply spread his hands in a gesture of open neutrality, clearly leaving the decision entirely in Issei's court, and then at Gabriel, who was watching the whole exchange with an expression of quiet, fond amusement that Issei did not entirely understand yet, and then back at the 2 girls in front of him, one bright with hope and the other intent with purpose. Both of them looking at him as though his answer actually mattered. Yeah, Issei said, and found that he meant it. Yeah, of course. I could use the help. And honestly, it's nice. Having more people who get it. What this is like. Excellent, Xenovia said, with the brisk satisfaction of a problem efficiently solved. Then we begin training tomorrow. I will expect you to be terrible at swordsmanship, given you have presumably never held one. Do not be discouraged. Everyone is terrible at first. Wow, thanks, Issei said, half laughing. She means it as encouragement, Irina said quickly. Really? That's just how she talks. You get used to it. Michael watched the 3 of them, already easing into the comfortable rhythm of new friends finding their footing, and exchanged a glance with Gabriel that carried a great deal of unspoken understanding. Whatever else came of all this, whatever larger conflicts loomed on the horizon that none of them could yet see clearly, something good, something genuinely warm, had just taken root in the cold stone hall beneath the church on the hill, and both of the ancient beings watching it happen recognized, with the quiet certainty of those who had lived through many ages, that it mattered. Chapter 6: The Stray. The first real test came 8 days later, on a Thursday evening, when Michael's expression turned grave in the middle of a training session and he raised a hand, calling an immediate halt. Issei, who had been in the middle of failing, for the 11th time that day, to land a clean strike against Xenovia's careful, patient defense, lowered the practice sword immediately, alert to the sudden change in the room. Something is wrong, Michael said, his eyes distant, focused on something none of the rest of them could perceive. A stray devil. A former servant who killed their master and fled rather than face judgment, hiding in the industrial district near the old textile warehouses. It has been there for some time, I believe, feeding quietly enough that it escaped notice. But it has just killed again, and carelessly this time. Humans will find the remains before morning unless someone intervenes. Is that our problem? Issei asked carefully. I mean, isn't that the kind of thing the devils handle? Sona mentioned something about, I don't know, jurisdiction? Normally, yes, Michael said. And under ordinary circumstances I would simply alert the Gremory household and allow them to deal with it, as is proper. But the Gremory heir and her peerage are currently occupied 2 towns over, dealing with a separate matter, and will not return before tomorrow. By then, the stray will likely have moved, or killed again, or both. I am reluctant to leave innocent lives at risk over a matter of protocol, Issei, but I must also be careful. If I act directly, myself, it could be read as heaven encroaching on devil territory, and after everything that has already happened with your own situation, tensions are delicate enough without adding to them. Xenovia's hand had already moved to Durandal's hilt. Then let us go, she said simply. Irina and I are exorcists. Dealing with stray devils that threaten human life falls well within our mandate, regardless of territory, provided we act to protect civilians rather than to claim the kill for ourselves. There is precedent. It would not be heaven acting. It would be the Church, doing exactly what the Church exists to do. And me? Issei asked. Michael studied him for a long moment, and Issei had the distinct impression that the Archangel was weighing something far heavier than the immediate question. You are not an exorcist, Issei, he said finally. And I would never order you into danger. But if you wish to accompany Xenovia and Irina, as a 4th presence, watching and learning, perhaps lending support if it were needed and only if it were needed, I would not object. The choice is entirely yours. There is no shame in choosing to stay here, either. You have only carried this power for 3 weeks. Issei thought of the fountain, of the cold spreading through his chest, and the moment he had thought, with simple and complete clarity, that he was going to die alone on a Tuesday because someone more powerful than him had decided his life was worth less than her own goals. He thought of the warehouse district, and whoever was about to discover, come morning, exactly what a stray devil left behind. I want to come, he said. Not to fight, necessarily. But if someone's in danger, and I can help, even a little, I don't want to just sit here because I'm scared. I think I'd regret that more than I'd regret being scared. Gabriel, who had been quiet through the exchange, crossed to him and rested a hand briefly against his shoulder, the gesture warm and grounding. That, she said softly, is exactly the kind of answer I would hope for from you, Issei. Be careful. All of you. And remember, the gauntlet responds to your will. If you are afraid, it is not a weakness. Fear simply means you understand what is at stake. The warehouse district, when they reached it 20 minutes later, was exactly as abandoned as its reputation suggested, rows of corrugated metal buildings dark and silent under a sky just beginning to show stars. Xenovia moved through it with the easy confidence of someone who had done this many times before, Raynare drawn and glowing faintly in the dark, while Irina kept pace beside her, her own blade, a smaller fragment of Excalibur mimic, held loosely but ready. Issei followed a half-step behind, the boosted gear already manifested on his arm, gold light pulsing steady and slow, like a held breath. They found the stray in the third warehouse they checked, and it was not what Issei had expected. He had braced himself, vaguely, for something monstrous, some twisted parody of a human form, and the creature crouched in the center of the warehouse floor, surrounded by the wreckage of crates and the unmistakable, awful evidence of what it had been doing here, was indeed monstrous. A hulking thing of fused chitin and too many limbs, with a face that had once, perhaps, been human and was now stretched into something with far too many teeth. What Issei had not expected was how it sounded when it noticed them. A low, wet, keening noise, not of menace but of something that, underneath the monstrous shape, was still afraid. Careful, Xenovia said quietly, raising Durandal. Strays are often what remains of a devil whose evil pieces could not contain the strain of their own power, twisted by it past recognition. There is very little of the original person left. Do not hesitate out of pity, Issei. Whatever it was, it is not that anymore, and it has already killed at least once tonight. The creature lunged, faster than its bulk suggested it should be able to move, and Xenovia met it head-on, Durandal flashing in a wide arc that the creature barely avoided, scattering crates in its wake. Irina darted to the side, drawing its attention with a flicker of light from her own blade, and for a moment the two exorcists worked in practiced tandem, driving the creature back step by step toward the rear wall of the warehouse. Then the creature, cornered, did something neither of them expected. It screamed, a sound of pure animal panic, and lashed out wildly, not at Xenovia or Irina, but sideways, toward a stack of crates that, Issei realized with a lurch of horror, was not empty. A figure was huddled there, small and human, a homeless man who had apparently been sheltering in the warehouse and had simply, terribly, not managed to get away in time. There was no time to think. Issei moved. Boost, the gauntlet's voice rang out, and Issei felt the familiar surge of doubled power. But this time, for the first time, he did not simply feel stronger. He felt the gold light at the center of his soul flare outward in response, instinctive, protective, and he was moving faster than he had ever moved in his life, faster than he had known he could move, crossing the distance to the huddled man in a blur and throwing himself between him and the creature's swinging claw. The claw struck, and light exploded outward from the point of impact, gold and white, a barrier of pure holy radiance blooming into existence around Issei and the man he was shielding, and the creature's claw shattered against it with a sound like breaking glass, the stray devil recoiling with a shriek of pain and shock. "Are you all right?" Issei said, to the man cowering behind him, his voice steadier than he felt. The man, wide-eyed and clearly terrified, managed a shaky nod, and Issei turned back to the creature, the gold barrier still humming around him, and felt something settle into place inside his chest, the same warm certainty he had felt in the training hall. only sharper now, focused, real. Boost, the gauntlet announced again, and this time Issei did not wait. He stepped forward, and the gold light around him gathered into his fist, and he struck the creature's outstretched arm with a blow that connected with a sound like a struck bell, light and force together, and the stray devil was flung bodily across the warehouse to crash into the far wall, where it slumped, twitching, stunned. Xenovia closed the distance in an instant, Durandal coming down in a clean, decisive arc, and the creature's struggles ceased. For a moment, the warehouse was silent except for the man's ragged breathing and the soft fading hum of the holy barrier dissolving around Issei, leaving him standing in the wreckage, breathing hard, the gold light of the gauntlet slowly dimming back to its resting glow. Issei, Irina said, a little breathlessly, hurrying over. That barrier. I've never seen anything like that. You didn't even seem to think about it, you just did it. Are you okay? I'm fine, Issei said, and found, to his own surprise, that it was true. His hands were shaking slightly, the aftermath of adrenaline, but underneath that he felt steady, clear, in a way he had not expected. He looked down at the man, who was staring up at him with an expression somewhere between terror and disbelief. Hey, Issei said gently, crouching down to his level. It's okay. You're safe now. Can you stand? Let's get you somewhere warm. Xenovia, sheathing Durandal, studied Issei with an expression that had shifted, in the last few moments, from her usual analytical interest into something closer to genuine respect. That barrier, she said, echoing Irina, was not something I taught you. Nor was that strike. Both of those came from somewhere else, Issei. From you? From both of us, actually, Drake rumbled, and there was something in the old dragon's voice that Issei had not heard before, something that, if he had to put a name to it, sounded almost like pride. The barrier was instinct, born from the holy light in your soul reaching to protect what your heart had already decided was worth protecting. The strike was simply what happens when that same heart decides something deserves to be stopped. I told Michael, weeks ago, that this power did not feel like it wanted to destroy. Tonight, partner, you just proved me right. Issei helped the shaken man to his feet, and the four of them, 3 sacred gear wielders and 1 frightened civilian, made their way out of the warehouse and into the cool night air, the stars overhead steady and bright, and behind them, in the wreckage of the warehouse floor, the stray devil's form was already beginning to dissolve into harmless motes of fading light, the way all such creatures eventually did, leaving no trace behind except the memory of a life that had gone terribly wrong. And perhaps, the small mercy of having been stopped before it could go wrong again. Word of what had happened reached the church before they did. When they returned, Michael was waiting at the door, and beside him stood Gabriel, and the moment Issei stepped through the gate, Gabriel crossed the courtyard quickly and pulled him, without hesitation, into a hug that smelled faintly of candle wax and something like fresh rain, warm and entirely unguarded. You frightened me, she said, into his shoulder, her voice slightly muffled. Michael felt the barrier form from here, Issei. Do you have any idea how much power that took? For someone who has carried this gift for 3 weeks to manifest a full sanctuary barrier on instinct, to protect a stranger, without a moment's hesitation she pulled back, holding him at arm's length, studying his face with an expression that was equal parts relief and something warmer, something Issei still did not quite have a name for. I am proud of you, she said simply. That is all. I am very proud of you. Issei felt his face heat, and was grateful for the darkness of the courtyard. I just didn't think about it, he said. There wasn't time to think. I just knew I had to do something. That, Michael said, joining them, his expression grave but not unkind, is precisely why I am concerned, and precisely why I am proud, in equal measure. Issei, what you did tonight was necessary, and it was good, and I do not regret allowing you to go. But it has also confirmed something I suspected. Your power responds most strongly, and most instinctively, to the desire to protect. That is a beautiful thing. It is also, I am afraid, going to make you very difficult to keep out of danger, because you will always choose to act, when someone needs help, whatever the cost to yourself. Is that a bad thing? Issei asked. No, Michael said, and for a moment something old and tired and very gentle crossed his face, the expression of a being who had watched countless wars begin and end and had, after all of it, chosen to believe in exactly this. It is, I think, the best thing about you. I simply intend to make certain, going forward, that when you choose to act, you are as prepared as we can possibly make you. Come inside, all of you. I imagine it has been a very long night, and there is hot tea, and I think, tonight, that is exactly what is called for. They went inside together, into the warm gold light of the church, for young people and two beings far older than any of them, and if any of them noticed that the night had marked a quiet turning point, that something had shifted, not in the world at large, but in the small constellation of people gathered in that room, none of them said so aloud. It did not need to be said. It was simply, gently true. The Seraphim's Dragon. Act 3, Chapter 7, The Gremory Invitation. A month after the night at the fountain, Issei received a letter. It arrived during homeroom, delivered by a school messenger with an apologetic look, and the moment Issei's fingers touched the envelope he felt the faint, distinctive hum of devil magic woven into the paper itself, a kind of seal that would only open for him. He waited until lunch to open it, finding a quiet corner of the rooftop, Drake's voice already murmuring with mild interest in the back of his mind. Gremory crest, Drake observed, as Issei turned the heavy cream paper over. The devil family that holds this territory. I suspect, partner, that this is the introduction Michael mentioned weeks ago. The one that almost happened, before he got to you first. The letter, written in elegant, looping script, was an invitation. Rias Gremory, heir to the Gremory clan and president of the Occult Research Club, requested the pleasure of Issei Hayato's company for tea, at his earliest convenience, to discuss matters of mutual interest, and, the letter added, to extend a belated welcome to a new and remarkable resident of Ko Town. It was warm in tone, courteous, and Issei thought, carefully worded in a way that left no room for him to feel cornered. He brought the letter to the church that afternoon, and Michael read it twice, his expression thoughtful. This is good, he said finally. Better than good, actually. Rias Gremory could very reasonably have felt slighted by what happened, Issei. By every expectation she had, you should have become a devil under her banner that night. Instead, heaven intervened, and by the unspoken rules that govern these things, that could have been read as an insult, even an act of aggression, however unintentional. That she is choosing, instead, to extend an invitation, openly and courteously, speaks very well of her character. You think I should go, Issei said. It was not really a question. I think Michael said that it would be wise, and also, I suspect, pleasant. Rias Gremory is known across the underworld as someone of unusual compassion, for a devil of her station. I do not believe this invitation is a trap, or a test, though I imagine she will be curious about you, in the same way Xenovia was when she first arrived. Curiosity is not hostility. And frankly, Issei, the sooner the local devil household and heaven's interests in this town find a way to coexist comfortably around you, the safer everyone will be, including you. Gabriel, who had been listening from across the room with a cup of tea cooling, untouched, in her hands, spoke up with what Issei was beginning to recognize as careful neutrality. I have met Rias Gremory's mother, once, many years ago, she said. Before any of this. She struck me as someone who valued kindness over pride, and I imagine her daughter has inherited at least some of that. I think you will like her, Issei. I also think, and here a faint, almost teasing note entered her voice, that you should bring Xenovia and Irina with you. Strength in numbers, and all that. Are you sure that's the only reason? Issei asked, with more boldness than he usually managed, and was rewarded with the sight of Gabriel's cheeks coloring faintly pink, an extraordinary thing to witness on the face of a being who had existed since before the dawn of recorded history. It is a perfectly reasonable reason, Gabriel said, with great dignity, and said nothing further on the subject, though Michael's expression, carefully composed, suggested he was finding the entire exchange enormously entertaining. The Occult Research Club's clubroom turned out to be a converted section of the old school building, the air inside humming faintly with the transportation circle inlaid into the floor. And when Issei arrived 2 days later, flanked by Xenovia and Irina, he found himself facing a room full of devils who all, to his considerable surprise, seemed genuinely pleased to see him. Rias Gremory rose from a couch near the center of the room as they entered, and Issei understood immediately why people described her the way they did. She had a presence, warm and commanding at once, crimson hair falling in a long, elegant sweep, and her smile, when she extended it toward him, held none of the wariness Issei had half-braced himself for. "Issei Shidou," she said. "Thank you for coming. I have to admit, I have been curious about you since the night this all happened, though for reasons that probably won't surprise you, I wasn't able to act on that curiosity as quickly as I would have liked." "Thanks for having us," Issei said, a little awkwardly. "And, I should probably say, I'm sorry about how things worked out. I know you and your, peerage were supposed to get there that night, and instead." "Don't apologize," Rias said, with surprising firmness, gesturing for them all to sit. "Issei, you nearly died. What happened that night was not a competition, and the fact that Michael reached you first did not cost me anything except, perhaps, a new member of my peerage, which, while I won't pretend I wasn't a little disappointed about, is hardly something for either of us to feel guilty over. What matters is that you're alive, and from what I understand, thriving. That's worth far more than any potential recruit." A boy with silver hair, sitting near the window with the kind of effortless poise that Issei immediately and instinctively distrusted on principle, spoke up with a faint smile. "Besides," he said, "a holy dragon knight allied with heaven, on good terms with the local devil household, is rather more useful to everyone's interests than one more pawn piece in Rias's peerage would have been. I'm Kiba, by the way. Yudo Kiba. Pleasure to meet the person half the underworld is currently arguing about." "People are arguing about me?" Issei asked, a little faintly. "Constantly," said a small girl with white hair, peering at him over the edge of a book with wide, owlish eyes. "Mostly old devils who don't like change. Don't worry about it. I'm Kaneko. The tea is good. You should try it." The afternoon passed more easily than Issei had expected, conversation ranging from comfortable small talk to genuinely useful exchanges of information, Rias explaining, with evident care for clarity, how the local balance of factions worked in practice rather than in theory, and Issei found himself relaxing in a way he had not anticipated, surrounded by devils who, whatever the old stories said about their kind, were simply people, with senses of humor and quiet kindnesses and the same kind of easy camaraderie he had with Xenovia and Irina. Near the end of the visit, as Issei was preparing to leave, Rias walked him to the door personally, her expression turning more serious. "Issei," she said quietly, "I want you to know that my peerage and I consider you a friend, going forward, regardless of factional politics. If you ever need anything at all, you can come to us. That offer doesn't expire, and it doesn't come with any strings attached." "I mean that." "Thank you," Issei said, and meant it. "That really means a lot, actually. One more thing," Rias added, and a faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "I've heard, through certain channels, that the Archangel Gabriel has taken a particular interest in your well-being. I won't pry. But for what it's worth, Issei, in case no one else has told you yet, that's not a small thing. Gabriel doesn't extend herself that way lightly. Whatever is happening there, I think it's worth paying attention to." Issei, who had spent the better part of the last month carefully not examining exactly why Gabriel's presence made his chest feel warm in a way that had nothing to do with holy light, found himself entirely unable to formulate a response, and Rias, laughing softly at his expression, simply patted his shoulder and wished him a good evening, leaving him to walk home with Xenovia and Irina in a state of pleasant, thoughtful confusion that lasted the entire way. Chapter 8: What Gabriel Carries. It became, over the following weeks, a quiet tradition. Most evenings, after training, Issei and Gabriel would walk together through the gardens behind the church, a small overgrown space of old roses and untended hedges that Gabriel had, with quiet affection, begun restoring in her spare time. Issei had started helping, at first simply because he was there and it seemed rude not to, and then because he found, to his own surprise, that he genuinely enjoyed it. There was something peaceful about working alongside her in the fading evening light, trimming roses and pulling weeds, talking about nothing in particular and sometimes about everything. It was on one such evening, Weeks into autumn now, the air growing cold enough that their breath showed faintly in the dusk, that Gabriel set down her shears, looked at the half-restored garden around them, and said, without any particular preamble, "Do you know why I spend so much time here, Issei? In this small, forgotten garden, in this small, forgotten town? I figured it was just, I don't know, a nice place to be," Issei said, looking up from the rose bush he had been carefully untangling from a stubborn weed. "It is that," Gabriel agreed. "But it is also something else." She sat down on the low stone bench at the garden's edge, and after a moment, Issei joined her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I am one of the 4 seraphim of heaven, Issei. Do you know what that means practically? It means that for most of my existence, I have been surrounded by reverence. By distance. Even the angels closest to me, the ones I love dearly, hold themselves apart, just slightly, out of respect for what I represent rather than for who I am. It is not unkind. It is simply how things are in heaven. Everyone keeps a small, careful distance." Issei was quiet, listening, sensing that this was something Gabriel had not said aloud often, perhaps ever. "This town," Gabriel continued, "this garden, these quiet evenings. They are the first time in longer than I can easily remember that anyone has simply existed beside me. Without ceremony. Without that careful distance." She turned to look at him, and her expression was open in a way Issei had not seen from her before, vulnerable, almost. "You do not treat me like a seraph, Issei. You argue with me about which roses to keep and which to prune. You tease me, gently, about things that have nothing to do with heaven at all. You let me be simply. Gabriel. I did not realize, until I met you, how much I had missed that. How much I had been carrying, without anyone to set it down beside. I didn't know," Issei said softly, "that it was like that for you. I'm sorry. That sounds really lonely, actually. Even surrounded by people." "It was," Gabriel admitted. Quietly. "In a way I had stopped noticing, because it had simply become the shape of my existence, and you do not notice the shape of water if you have always lived underwater." She smiled, and reached out, almost hesitantly, to brush a stray leaf from Issei's hair, the gesture small and unguarded. And then a boy nearly died in a fountain, and an old friend broke a rule he had never broken before, and I found myself, quite without meaning to, surfacing for the first time in longer than I care to admit. You did that, Issei. Just by being yourself. I do not think you understand yet how rare that is. How precious. Issei felt his face heat, the way it always did when Gabriel spoke to him like this, with that particular gentle directness that left no room for him to deflect with a joke the way he might have, once, with anyone else. He started, and stopped, and tried again. I just like spending time with you. That's all it ever was, for me. I didn't think about it being anything special. It just felt nice. Easy. Like it was supposed to be like this. It is special, Gabriel said softly. Precisely because it feels easy. Do you understand, Issei, how rare it is, for someone like me, for anything to feel easy? She paused, and then, very gently, took his hand in both of hers, holding it the way one might hold something fragile and important at once. I do not know what this is between us. I have never felt anything quite like it before, not in all my long existence, and I confess that frightens me a little, even as it also makes me happier than I think I have been in centuries. But I know that I do not want it to stop. I know that I want to keep sitting in this garden with you, every evening, for as long as you will let me. I'm not going anywhere, Issei said, and his voice came out steadier than he expected, certain in a way that surprised even himself. Gabriel, I like you. Really like you. I've been kind of dancing around saying that for weeks because I figured, you're an archangel, and I'm just some guy who got lucky enough to survive, and it felt presumptuous, or something. But, yeah, I like you. A lot. For a long moment, Gabriel simply looked at him, her golden eyes bright in the dusk, and then she laughed, soft and a little disbelieving, and leaned her head against his shoulder, the gesture so natural and so unguarded that Issei felt something in his chest ease completely, some tension he had not even fully realized he was carrying. "You absurd, wonderful boy," she said fondly. "Presumptuous. As though rank could possibly matter," set against this. "Issei, I am one of the most powerful beings in all of heaven, and I have just spent several minutes worrying that you might not feel the same way I do. Do you understand how absurd that is?" "A little," Issei admitted, laughing too now, the warmth between them settling into something easy and certain and entirely new. "For what it's worth, I was worried about the exact same thing. Guess we were both being kind of silly." "Wonderfully silly," Gabriel agreed, and they sat together in the deepening dusk, hand in hand, the half-restored garden quiet around them, roses and old stone and the first stars beginning to appear overhead, and neither of them moved to go inside for a long while, content simply to remain exactly where they were. When they finally returned to the church, Michael took one look at the two of them, at Gabriel's faint, persistent smile and the new, easy way she leaned slightly toward Issei without seeming to notice she was doing it, and allowed himself a smile of his own, warm and entirely unsurprised. "I see," he said simply, and did not elaborate further, though something in his tone suggested he had been waiting for exactly this for some time, and was, in his quiet way, very glad it had finally arrived. Chapter 9: The Fallen Angel's Gambit. The peace did not last uninterrupted, of course. 3 weeks after the evening in the garden, Michael called an urgent gathering at the church, his expression graver than Issei had ever seen it, and when Issei, Gabriel, Xenovia, and Irina assembled in the training hall, they found a fifth figure already present, a man Issei did not recognize, dressed in the dark robes of a church investigator. His face drawn with the particular exhaustion of someone who had traveled a long way carrying bad news. "This is Father Valentin," Michael said. "He has been investigating, on the church's behalf, the matter of the fallen angel who attacked Issei, the one whose actions began all of this. I am afraid what he has found confirms my worst suspicions, and complicates matters considerably." Father Valentin inclined his head and spoke without preamble, in the clipped, careful tone of someone who had rehearsed exactly how to deliver difficult information. "The fallen angel who attacked Issei Shidou was named Raynare," he said. "A minor figure, by most accounts, of little independent importance. However, our investigation has determined that her attack was not, as Archangel Michael initially hoped, the act of a rogue agent acting alone. Raynare was acting under orders from a fallen angel faction operating out of the old church on the outskirts of this very town, a faction that has been, for some time, conducting unsanctioned operations to harvest sacred gears from human hosts, killing them in the process, in direct violation of the truce." The room was very quiet. "How many?" Issei asked, his voice quieter than he intended. "At least 7, that we have confirmed," Valentin said, and there was real grief in his voice now, beneath the careful professionalism. "Across the past 2 years. Young people, mostly, with sacred gears of varying significance, lured and killed the same way you were nearly killed, their gears extracted and, we believe, sold or delivered to a buyer whose identity remains unclear. You, Issei Shidou, are the only one of the 7 who survived, and only because Archangel Michael's intervention was, by every measure, a miracle in the most literal sense." Issei felt something cold settle in his chest, an echo, almost, of the cold he had felt that night at the fountain, though this cold was anger, not fear. 6 other people, ordinary people, who had simply been going about their lives, had been murdered, quietly, for parts, and the only reason he was sitting here instead of being a 7th name on that list was an accident of timing and an archangel's willingness to break an ancient rule. "Where are they now?" he said. "This faction. The old church." "Issei," Michael said carefully, "I understand the anger you are feeling. I feel it too. But I need you to understand, before we discuss next steps, that this faction is not small, and they are not careless. They have remained hidden for 2 years specifically because they are cautious, and well organized, and almost certainly aware, by now, that their attempt on you failed, and that you have not only survived, but become something none of us anticipated. If they believe their operation is at risk of exposure, they may act quickly, and unpredictably. Then we have to act first," Xenovia said, already on her feet, her expression hard. Michael, with respect, Every day this faction continues to operate is a day closer to an eighth name on that list. We cannot simply wait for them to make the first move. I agree, Michael said, surprising Issei slightly. Which is why I have already begun coordinating, quietly, with both the church and, with some delicacy, the Gremory household, who have offered their assistance. This is precisely the kind of situation where cooperation between our factions matters most, Issei. A rogue fallen angel faction harvesting sacred gears threatens everyone, regardless of allegiance. Rias Gremory has agreed to lend her peerage's support, discreetly, should it come to a direct confrontation. What about me? Issei said. What's my part in this? Michael's expression softened, just slightly, though the gravity beneath it did not lessen. Issei, I want to be honest with you, because I think you deserve nothing less. This faction's entire operation began, in part, because of you, because of the boosted gear you carry. If we move against them, they will know, almost certainly, that you are involved, and that may draw their attention toward you specifically, in ways more dangerous than before. I would understand entirely if you wished to remain here, while the rest of us handled this. No, Issei said, immediately, and the gold light of the brave Saint mark on his arm pulsed once, bright, as though in agreement. Michael, 6 people died because of what these people are doing. People like me? People who probably felt the exact same fear I felt, in that fountain, except nobody came for them in time. I'm not going to sit here safely while everyone else goes and finishes this. I want to help. I need to help. Please. Gabriel reached over and took his hand, her grip firm, steadying, and when Issei looked at her, he found no hesitation in her expression at all, only quiet, fierce support. Then we go together, she said simply, and looked to Michael. I am coming as well, Michael. I have stayed in the background of this town's affairs for weeks now, out of respect for the delicacy of the situation. But this is no longer simply a delicate political matter. This is a faction within our own ranks, murdering innocents, and I will not stand aside while that continues, not when I have the power to help end it. Michael studied the gathered group, Gabriel resolute, Xenovia already calculating tactics, Irina's usual warmth hardened into something more serious, and Issei, gold light steady on his arm, his jaw set with a determination that, Michael reflected, had not been there 3 months ago, when he had been simply a frightened boy on the floor of a fountain. Whatever else had happened since that night, this boy had grown, and grown into someone who would not, could not, stand by. Very well, Michael said finally. Then we move tomorrow night, when our information suggests the faction's leadership will be gathered at the old church for what appears to be a final transaction, the sale of a sacred gear they extracted 3 days ago from their most recent victim. If we move then, we have the best chance of stopping this faction entirely, in a single action, and of recovering whatever evidence remains of their other victims, so that their families might finally have answers. And the buyer? Irina asked quietly. The one purchasing these sacred gears. Do we know who that is? Father Valentine's expression turned grim. We do not, he admitted. And that, I confess, troubles me more than the faction itself. Someone with the resources and the inclination to purchase stolen sacred gears, repeatedly, over 2 years, without ever once being identified. That is not the profile of an opportunist. That is the profile of someone with a plan, and patience, and very deep pockets. I fear that whatever we accomplish tomorrow night, Issei, it may only be the first thread of a much larger tapestry. One we have not yet begun to see the shape of. The room fell quiet again, the weight of that thought settling over all of them, and Issei looked down at the gold light pulsing steadily beneath the skin of his forearm, and thought of 6 names he did not know, and of a 7th that, by the smallest margin imaginable, was not his own. Whatever tomorrow night held, whatever larger shadow Father Valentine's words had just gestured toward, Issei found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he was not afraid. Not the way he had been, 3 months ago, in the dark, with a spear of light through his chest and no one coming. He had people now. People who would come. And tomorrow night, for the first time, he intended to be one of the people who came for someone else. Then let's get ready, he said quietly, and around him, one by one, the others nodded, and the training hall, gold-lit and quiet, filled with the focused, purposeful energy of people preparing, together, for what came next. The Seraphim's Dragon. Act 4. Chapter 10. The Old Church. The old church on the outskirts of Kos sat at the end of a road that fewer and fewer people seemed to use, its bell tower leaning slightly, its windows boarded over with wood gone gray and soft with age. To anyone passing by, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to look like, an abandoned building slowly losing its argument with time. Issei, standing at the edge of the tree-line with Gabriel beside him and Xenovia and Irina a few steps ahead, could feel, even from here, the faint wrongness humming beneath that abandoned shell, a coiled, careful presence trying very hard not to be noticed. There are 7 of them inside, Michael said quietly, materializing beside them with barely a sound, his expression set in the calm, focused lines of someone who had done this many times before, in other ages, against other threats. 6 fallen angels of moderate strength, and one who is considerably stronger than the rest, likely their leader. There is also a transaction occurring as we speak, in the basement beneath the altar. A sacred gear, recently extracted, is changing hands. The buyer, Xenovia said. Is he there in person? No, Michael said, and something in his tone suggested this troubled him. The transaction is occurring through an intermediary, a contracted broker, someone with no factional allegiance at all, the kind of person who exists specifically to make these kinds of exchanges untraceable. Whoever is ultimately receiving these sacred gears has been careful enough never to appear personally, even here, even now. We will not learn their identity tonight, I am afraid. But we can stop this exchange, and dismantle this faction, and recover the stolen gear before it disappears into whatever network is moving it. Rias Gremory's voice came from behind them, calm and certain. My peerage is in position around the perimeter, she said, stepping into view with Kiba and Kaneko flanking her, both looking quietly ready in the way of people who had done this before and did not need to perform readiness. Aquino and the others are covering the rear exits. Nothing leaves this building without us knowing about it. Whenever you are ready, Michael. Michael nodded once, and turned to Issei, his expression gentling slightly. Issei, he said, I want you to remember what we discussed. Your priority tonight is not to fight every battle yourself. It is to ensure that the sacred gear inside that building, and anyone these people might still try to use as a hostage or a shield, comes out of this safely. Let Xenovia and Irina handle direct combat where they can. Trust your instincts. They have not failed you yet. Got it, Issei said, and the boosted gear settled onto his arm with its familiar warm weight, gold light steady in the dark. Ready when you are, partner, Drake murmured, and there was an edge to the old dragon's voice now, focused and alert, the readiness of a creature who had walked into more battles than could be counted and had, for the first time in a very long while, something genuinely worth fighting for. They moved in together, Michael's wings unfolding in a silent rush of white as he led the way through the church's broken front doors, and the interior, which had looked from outside like nothing more than rotting pews and broken glass, revealed itself the moment they crossed the threshold to be something else entirely, the illusion dissolving like mist to show a space lit by sickly violet light. 6 fallen angels turning in shock at the sudden intrusion, dark wings snapping open in alarm. Archangel Michael, one of them said, voice cracking with disbelief, and then, seeing the others behind him, the color drained visibly from his face. And Gremory. And wait. Is that? Yes, Michael said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, calm but utterly without give. This is Issei, the boy your colleague Raynare attempted to kill 3 months ago, for his sacred gear, on the orders, I believe, of whoever is currently in your basement conducting business. He survived. And tonight, he and I, along with our allies, are here to ensure that no one else suffers what he very nearly suffered. The fallen angel who had spoken took a half-step back, and then, with the particular desperation of someone who knew the situation was already lost and intended to make it as costly as possible regardless, raised both hands, light spears crackling into existence between his fingers. Take them, he snarled, to the others, and the chamber erupted into motion. Xenovia was moving before the words had finished, Durandal flashing silver-white as she closed on the nearest fallen angel, and Irina was right behind her, the two of them falling into the same easy, practice rhythm Issei had seen in the warehouse, driving their opponents back step by step. Kiba's twin swords blurred into motion against the third opponent, and Kaneko, small and silent, simply walked through the chaos toward a fourth fallen angel and struck him with a blow that sent him through a stone pillar. Issei felt the gauntlet pulse, boost, and moved to intercept a spear of light arcing toward Rias's exposed back, the holy barrier blooming instantly around his raised arm and absorbing the strike with a flare of gold and a sound like a struck bell. The fallen angel who had thrown it, a woman with dark hair and an expression of pure venom, turned toward Issei with sudden, focused fury. "You," she spat. "The Gremory's little pet dragon, blessed by heaven. Do you have any idea what you've cost us? 2 years of careful work, and you survive, and now you bring an archangel to our door. You killed people," Issei said, and his voice was steadier than he expected, the gold light around him brightening, not with anger exactly, but with something harder, more certain. 6 people. 4 parts. I'm not going to apologize for surviving, and I'm definitely not going to apologize for making sure you can't do it again. Boost, the gauntlet announced again, and Issei felt the familiar doubling, the gold light at his core flaring brighter, and this time, rather than waiting for an attack, he moved first, crossing the distance between them in a blur and meeting her spear of light with his gauntlet fist. The collision produced a flash of brilliant white, the spear shattering on contact, and the fallen angel was thrown backward into the chamber wall, stunned. Across the chamber, Michael moved with the terrible, economical grace of a being who had fought in wars that had reshaped the world, his presence alone seeming to draw the violet light from the chamber's edges, replacing it with clean gold radiance that the fallen angels flinched away from instinctively. Within minutes, what had begun as a desperate, chaotic clash had resolved into something far more one-sided, the 6 lesser fallen angels subdued, bound in chains of golden light that Michael wove with barely a gesture, leaving only the leader, the one Michael had identified as considerably stronger than the rest, still standing near the entrance to the basement stairs, watching the unfolding defeat of his subordinates with an expression of cold, calculating fury. "It seems," the leader said, his voice smooth and unhurried despite the chaos around him, "that I have badly underestimated several things tonight. The boy." The Archangel's continued interest in him. "And I confess the Gremory's willingness to cooperate so openly with heaven." His gaze settled on Issei, and something in his expression sharpened, calculating, almost hungry. "Tell me, boy. Does it itch? Carrying something that was never meant to coexist inside you. Dragon and divinity, fused together by an old fool's desperation. I wonder what would happen if that fusion were disrupted. Forcibly." "Do not," Michael said, and for the first time that night, his voice carried an edge of genuine warning, cold and absolute. "Finish that thought." The fallen angel leader smiled, thin and humorless, and Issei felt, rather than saw, the spike of dark energy gathering in the man's hand, condensing rapidly into something that hummed with a wrongness Issei recognized instinctively, the same kind of wrongness he had felt for one terrible instant at the fountain, 3 months ago, before the world went cold. "That is a corrupted light spear," Drake said sharply, all amusement gone from the dragon's voice now, replaced by something close to alarm. "Designed specifically to disrupt sacred gear bonds. If that strikes you while the fusion is active, partner, I do not know what happens. Nothing good. Move." Issei moved, but not away. He moved toward Gabriel. It happened in less than a second. The fallen angel leader, his attention split between Issei and the chaos of his collapsing operation, had aimed not at Issei directly, but at Gabriel, standing nearby, her attention momentarily on one of the bound fallen angels rather than on the leader himself, the corrupted spear arcing toward her with terrible speed. Issei threw himself into its path without a single moment's hesitation, the holy barrier flaring instinctively around him, gold light blazing up to meet the corrupted spear head-on. The collision was unlike anything Issei had felt before. The corrupted spear did not shatter against the barrier the way ordinary light had. Instead, it seemed to claw at the barrier, at the fusion of dragon and divinity that the barrier was made from, a horrible wrenching sensation that Issei felt not in his body, but somewhere deeper, in the place where Drake's presence lived alongside his own soul. For one terrible, vertiginous moment, Issei felt the two halves of himself, dragon and saint, strain against each other, the way they never had before. Two forces that had coexisted peacefully for 3 months suddenly, violently, reminded of every old text that said they should never have been able to coexist at all. Hold, Drake's voice roared, not in alarm now but in something fierce and absolute, a command rather than a warning. Hold, partner. Whatever this is trying to do, it is trying to tear us apart. I will not allow it. Do you hear me? I will not allow it. And Issei, in the space of that single impossible moment, found something inside himself to hold on to. Not strength, exactly. Something simpler. He thought of Gabriel, standing just behind him, safe because he had moved fast enough. He thought of 6 names he did not know, and a 7th that was his own, and of Xenovia's blunt kindness, and Irina's bright warmth, and Rias's open hand of friendship, and Michael's quiet, patient faith in him from the very first night. He thought, simply and completely, that he did not want any of that to end, not here, not like this, and the gold light around him, instead of straining and fracturing, surged. The corrupted spear shattered. Not with the clean ring of ordinary light breaking, but with a sound like something deeply wrong being unmade, a shriek of violet energy dissolving into harmless gold sparks that drifted down around Issei like falling snow. The fallen angel leader, who had clearly expected something very different to happen, stared at Issei with an expression of pure, undisguised shock, the calculating coldness gone entirely, replaced by something that, for the first time, looked very much like fear. That, he said, his voice unsteady now, is not possible. You should probably stop trying things that aren't possible, Issei said, breathing hard but steady, the gold light around him settling, warm and unbroken, exactly as it had been before. It's not working out great for you tonight. Michael moved then, closing the distance in an instant, and the fallen angel leader, his confidence shattered along with his weapon, found himself bound in golden chains alongside his subordinates before he could so much as raise his hands again. The chamber, violet light gone now entirely, replaced by the warm gold glow of Michael's presence, fell quiet, the fight over almost as suddenly as it had begun. Gabriel was at Issei's side in an instant, her hands cupping his face, searching his expression with an intensity that bordered on frantic. Issei, are you all right? That spear, it was meant to tear apart exactly the kind of fusion you carry. I felt it. I felt what it was trying to do to you, and you just stood there and held. I'm okay, Issei said, and found, checking, that it was true, the warmth in his chest steady and whole, Drake's presence settled and calm again, no trace of the violent strain from a moment ago. I'm okay, Gabriel. I promise. It tried, but it didn't work. I wasn't going to let it work. You threw yourself in front of a weapon designed specifically to destroy what you are, Gabriel said, and her voice shook, just slightly, somewhere between fear and something fiercer. For me. Issei, you cannot keep doing that. You cannot keep choosing other people over your own safety, every single time, without even a moment's hesitation. I know, Issei said softly, covering her hands with his own. I know. But Gabriel, that's not something I can just turn off. It's not something I want to turn off, even if I could. You're important to me. All of you are. If it comes down to a choice between my safety and someone I care about, I'm always going to choose the second one. I think that's just who I am now. Maybe who I always was, actually. Gabriel looked at him for a long moment, frustration and fear and something far warmer all warring visibly across her expression, and then, very slowly, she let out a breath, and the fear eased, leaving something that looked almost like resigned, helpless fondness in its place. I know, she admitted quietly. I know that is who you are. It is, I think, one of the reasons I love you as much as I do. I simply also reserve the right to be terrified every time you do it. Deal, Issei said, and the two of them stood together amid the gold-lit wreckage of the fight, the bound fallen angels, Michael's calm efficient organization of the cleanup already underway, and for a moment, despite everything, despite the corrupted spear and the strain Issei had felt and the fear in Gabriel's voice, there was only this. The two of them, safe, together, having held against something that should have torn them apart, and finding, instead, that it had only made what they had stronger. Chapter 11. What was found? The basement beneath the old church, once the bound fallen angels had been secured and the chamber above made safe, proved to be far larger than the building's modest footprint suggested, a warren of rooms carved into the earth that had clearly served as the faction's operational center for the better part of 2 years. Michael led the way down, Issei and the others following, and what they found there settled over the group like a physical weight. There were records. Careful, methodical records, the kind kept by people who viewed murder as logistics, names and dates and descriptions of sacred gears extracted, cross-referenced with notes on buyers and prices and shipping arrangements that made Issei's stomach turn. Father Valentine, who had accompanied them down, moved through the records with the grim, focused efficiency of someone who had been searching for exactly this for a long time, and his expression, as he worked, grew steadily darker. Here, he said finally, holding up a ledger, his voice tight. The 7 names. All of them. Confirmed, with dates, with locations. Issei, I am sorry to ask this of you, but I believe it would mean a great deal to the families of these victims if someone who survived, who can speak to what these people went through, were willing to help us locate them, so that they might finally know what happened to their children. Issei took the ledger, and made himself read the names, one by one. 6 names, 6 dates, 6 brief clinical notes about sacred gear types and extraction methods that Issei made himself read all the way through, because it felt important, somehow, not to look away from what these people had actually suffered. The 7th name, at the bottom of the list, was his own, with a single word written beside it in red ink, failed. I'll help, Issei said quietly, closing the ledger. Whatever I can do. These people deserve to be more than a line in someone's accounting book. They deserve to be remembered as people. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that happens. Thank you, Valentine said, and something in his composed exterior cracked, just slightly, grief and gratitude mingling in his expression. That means more than you know, Issei. Truly. It was Xenovia, methodically searching a side room that had served, apparently, as some kind of storage area, who made the next discovery, and her voice, when she called the others over, carried a note of genuine alarm that Issei had not heard from her before. Michael, she said. You need to see this. In the center of the room, set into a stone pedestal and surrounded by careful warding circles, sat a single sacred gear, extracted and contained, glowing with a faint, sickly light. But it was not the gear itself that had drawn Xenovia's alarm. It was the symbol carved into the pedestal beneath it, a sigil that none of the fallen angels upstairs had matched, something older and stranger, that made Michael's expression, when he saw it, turn graver than Issei had yet seen it. That symbol, Michael said slowly, is not a fallen angel sigil. Nor a devil's. Nor anything from the church's records that I am aware of. It is older than any of those factions, Issei. Far older. I have seen it only twice before in my existence, both times in contexts I had hoped never to encounter again. What does it mean? Rias asked, her own expression tightening with concern. It means, Michael said, that whoever has been purchasing these sacred gears is not simply a wealthy collector, or a faction seeking an advantage in the ordinary balance of power between heaven, hell, and the fallen. This sigil belongs to something older than all 3 factions, something that predates the current order entirely, a remnant of powers that existed before the world's current balance was established, and that, as far as I had believed, no longer had any active presence in this age at all. You're saying, Issei said slowly, that whoever's behind this isn't just some devil or fallen angel with a grudge. It's something older. Something that shouldn't even still exist. I'm saying, Michael said, that I do not yet know what this means, only that it troubles me more than anything else we have found tonight, and that it suggests Father Valentine's earlier instinct, that this faction's activities were only the first thread of a much larger tapestry, may have been more correct than even he feared. Whoever is collecting these sacred gears, and for whatever purpose, has resources and knowledge that should not exist in this age. That is not a small thing, Issei. That is, potentially, a very large thing indeed. The chamber was quiet for a long moment, the recovered sacred gear glowing faintly on its pedestal, the strange old sigil beneath it catching the gold light of Michael's presence, and seeming, for just a moment, to glow back, faint and violet and ancient, before subsiding once more into stillness. Whatever it is, Issei said finally, and his voice, though quiet, carried a steadiness that made every person in the room turn to look at him. We'll figure it out. Together. That's what we do now, right? We figure things out, and we help people, and we don't let stuff like this win. I don't know what this sigil means yet. But I know that whatever it is, it's not going to get to hurt anyone else. Not while I have anything to say about it. Gabriel's hand found his, warm and certain, and around the room, one by one, the others nodded, Xenovia's grim determination, Irina's quiet resolve, Rias's steady confidence, Michael's old, patient faith, all of them settling into the same simple certainty Issei had just given voice to. Whatever larger shadow had just revealed the edge of itself in this hidden room beneath an abandoned church, it would not face them unprepared, and it would not face them alone. Chapter 12, A Quiet Morning. The days following the raid on the old church were busy ones, filled with the careful, unglamorous work of cleanup, the transfer of the bound fallen angels to church custody for judgment, the slow process of returning the recovered sacred gear to whatever family member might still claim it, and the quiet, painstaking effort of locating the families of the 6 victims whose names Issei had read in that ledger, so that they might finally have answers, however painful those answers were. Issei threw himself into all of it, alongside the others, finding a strange kind of comfort in the work itself, in being useful, in turning grief into something that, even in small ways, helped. It was exhausting, and some of the conversations, with parents who had spent 2 years not knowing what had happened to their children, were among the hardest things Issei had ever done. But he did not regret a single one of them, and when, a week later, Father Valentine reported that all 6 families had been found, and informed, and had, in their grief, expressed a quiet, profound gratitude that someone had cared enough to make sure their children were not simply forgotten, Issei felt something settle in his chest that had nothing to do with the boosted gear at all, something that simply felt, for the first time since the night at the fountain, like the beginning of something being set right. It was on a quiet Sunday morning, nearly 2 weeks after the raid, that Issei found himself back in the garden behind the church, working alongside Gabriel in the soft morning light, the roses, after weeks of careful tending, finally beginning to bloom again in earnest, deep red and soft gold against the old gray stone. It's strange, Issei said, sitting back on his heels and looking around at the garden, fuller and more alive now than it had been when he first started helping. 3 months ago, I almost died on a Tuesday because some guy wanted my sacred gear, and now I'm here, gardening, with an archangel, fighting off ancient evil sigils on the weekends. My life got really weird really fast. Gabriel laughed, the sound bright in the morning air, and settled beside him on the grass, her wings folding loosely behind her, catching the sunlight. Weird, she agreed, but I think good. Issei, may I ask you something? Sure. Do you regret it? Gabriel asked, and there was something careful in the question, something that suggested she had been wanting to ask it for a while. Any of it? The mark. The fusion. Everything that's happened because of that night. If you could go back, and choose differently, somehow, choose to simply be an ordinary boy who never carried a sacred gear at all, never met any of us. Would you? Issei considered the question seriously, looking out over the garden, at the roses Gabriel had spent months coaxing back to life, at the church behind them where Xenovia was, even now, almost certainly running Irina through some brutal early morning training drill, at the wider town beyond, where Rias and her peerage were probably enjoying a quiet Sunday of their own, friends now. In a way that had seemed impossible 3 months ago. No, he said finally, and he meant it completely. I mean, the almost dying part, sure, I could have done without that. But everything after? Gabriel, 3 months ago, I was a pretty ordinary kid with a perverted sense of humor, and not much going for him beyond that. Now I've got this. He gestured around them, at the garden, at the church, at her. Friends who'd go to war for me, and have. People I'd go to war for, just as easily. Someone who loves me, and who I love right back, in a way I genuinely did not think was possible for someone like me. A chance to actually matter, to actually help people, in a way that's real. I wouldn't trade that. Not for anything. Not even to undo the worst night of my life, because that night is also the reason I got everything that came after it. Gabriel was quiet for a moment, watching him with an expression of such open warmth that Issei felt his face heat, even after everything, even after weeks of this being simply, comfortably true between them. That, she said softly, is, I think, the most answer you could possibly have given. And it is, for what it's worth, exactly how I feel too. I would not undo that night either, Issei. Not for anything. It gave me you. And I would not trade that. Not for all the quiet centuries in the world. She leaned over, and kissed him, soft and unhurried, in the morning light, surrounded by roses she had brought back from the edge of being forgotten, much, Issei thought, as he had been, and as she, in her own way, had been too, and for a long moment, either of them moved, content simply to be exactly where they were, together, in a garden that, like both of them, had found its way back to blooming. From the church doorway, unnoticed, Michael watched the two of them for a moment, his expression soft, before quietly closing the door again to give them their privacy, and turned instead toward the training hall, where the sound of Xenovia's voice, brisk and encouraging, and Irina's answering laughter, drifted up from below, two young ex-horses training together in the gold-lit dark, growing steadily stronger, steadily closer. In a place that had, 3 months ago, been simply an abandoned church on a hill, and was now, in every way that mattered, something far more than that. Outside, beyond the hill, beyond the town, the wider world continued on its way, unaware, for now, of the strange old sigil that had surfaced beneath an abandoned church, or of the shadow it suggested, vast and old and patient, somewhere beyond the edges of what any of them could yet see. But here, in this small garden, in this quiet morning, none of that shadow had yet reached, and for now, that was enough. For now, there was only sunlight, and roses, and the steady, certain warmth of people who had found, against every old rule and every old taboo, exactly where they belong.